Welcome. My name is Keith Baker. I'm the Executive Director for ReConnect Rondo, project to kind of help support the community recovering from the devastation caused by the highway system. Also with me is my colleague in the work, Micaiah Griffin. She is the Executive Director of the Rondo Community Land Trust. And between the two of our organizations, we're moving forward to try to create the kind of positive impact that we know the cause of the freeway really undermined. So ReConnect Rondo is an organization that was technically founded in 2017. But there's been a lot of work over many years that a lot of organizations have done to rebuild the community. ReConnect Rondo is really looking at how do you leverage transportation and transportation policy and transportation investment to rebuild the community. It was the very tool used to undermine the community overall, to reignite an African American cultural enterprise district, leveraging transportation investment. I want to just give you a little bit of the storyline so you know kind of a little bit of how we got here. If you really take a look at migration of African Americans to St. Paul began as early as the 1800s, 1835. And for 120 plus years, the community was establishing its fabric, its social, cultural, economic, civic, spiritual fabric, which ultimately in the 1950s, if you see there, 1956, the Federal Highway Act and urban renewal, both were happening at the same time. Then the destruction. The freeway comes through, tears apart that social, cultural, economic, and civic fabric of the community. And so for many, many years since that time, organizations like the Rondo Community Land Trust, Hallie Q. Brown, Model Cities, we talk about Walker West Music Academy, all of these organizations have spent a number of years responding to how devastating the community was left. For us, what's important also is in 2015, at the time, there was the Commissioner of Transportation, Charlie Zelle, and the former mayor, Coleman, both apologized in 2015, formally at a healing ceremony that took place. But just before that, in 2009, there was an opportunity where the community pushed back because of the Central Light Rail Corridor. If you recall, there were no stops along the Central Light Rail Corridor. So that brought forward the idea, well, not only do we want stops in Rondo, but we're looking for the land to be replaced that was taken in the 50s. So just framing the story of ReConnect Rondo, how we emerged, how this idea of a land bridge came about, it was directly tied to that. There's a question that you have.
Yes, good afternoon, sir. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand, when you said the highway destroyed the African community.
Yeah.
African American.
Yep.
Help me understand what really took place. Did the houses, the entire community was all taken up with the highway?
You're asking the right question, so I'll begin to address some of those more concrete things, but I want to let you know how this idea emerged. It wasn't that ReConnect Rondo decided it wanted to build a land bridge. It really came from the community. That was the initiative. And it was because there were no stops along the freeway or along the Central Light Rail Corridor that the community says that's not okay. And oh, by the way, why don't we replace the land that was taken in the 1950s? So when we think about the route of the freeway, historically, there was a decision to take it through Rondo. There was a northern route that was an alternative. It would have been Pierce Butler, where there would have been no homes taken. So it was an intentional decision to take it through the Rondo community. And we have to really understand, like I said, urban renewal was going on, and what urban renewal was trying to grab cheap land, underinvested in land, okay, and then utilize that, because it wasn't going to go through a wealthy community. In fact, across the country, 900 communities were affected, particularly black and brown communities, just like Rondo. It causes root shock. I don't know, has anyone heard the term root shock? Can you imagine what that is? It's shock to the system. The social, the cultural, the economic, the civic, the spiritual fabric of a community goes through root shock when something comes through it, right? It's not just applicable to Rondo. We can even think about when war is going on, the shock that it creates. But in this instance, it just happens to be the African American community, and like I said, more than 950 communities across the country. I talk about the ecosystem. Rondo Community Land Trust, Aurora St. Anthony, Model Cities, Hallie Q. Brown. These organizations that stepped in to respond. And it's the ecosystem, ultimately, where the fabric of rebuilding not only has been taking place, but I think really sets for the future. The ecosystem is already located. You all are kind of familiar with the geographic area. We've got Lexington. We've got Rice Street. We've got the idea of a geographic location to reconnect the community, to reignite an African American cultural enterprise district, which was Rondo before the freeway came through, the social, cultural, economic fabric. Within that, there are a number of organizations and businesses that have an opportunity to be amplified and resourced to respond to what has taken place historically. A number of studies we've conducted, and we think that it's important for us to make a business case, a technical case, a moral case, and a just case, okay? It's easy to dismiss the movement of African Americans, okay, by saying, okay, where's the study? Where's the information? So we want to make sure in no way can an opportunity that we have right now be dismissed. Again, a technical case, a business case, a moral case, and a just case. And just to give you a little bit of my background, which I failed to do earlier on. I spent 18 years working for the Department of Transportation. I know how the systems, the processes, the tools, and resources function, right? The very tools that were used to undermine the community, right? And so the question is how does the community harness the policies, the monies, the processes, and the tools, right, to repair that harm? I left the Department of Transportation in 2015, and behind the scenes, I've been working with elders that were involved in the pushback on the Central Light Rail Corridor, who really are the founders of the organization I now lead. Okay? So you see the relationship, and I think it's important for you to kind of see the entirety of the story. Let's think about what was taken. 700 homes and 300 businesses. Now, that's research. That's definitive loss, right? It's not just an idea, an anecdotal story of someone's house that was taken. It's real value. So just imagine 700 businesses or 300 businesses and 700 homes taken. What's the value of the loss? 48% home ownership loss, 61% population loss in this geographic area from Lexington to Rice Street. Okay, 61% population loss, 48% home ownership loss. It's extraordinary, right, when you think about it. Not only that, we wanted to know, okay, so what's the transactional loss, the home sale or buy loss? Okay, we use a snapshot in time of 1980, tried to calculate the loss from 1956. The homes were taken in 1956. The value, when we follow the sales cycles of homes in the area that are similar to the homes that were along this track of freeway that was taken out, collectively, it's $35 million worth of loss value, never able to be passed on to descendants. 35 million. But let's just imagine additional loss. That 35 million could have started a business, could have sent children to college. And I will say we quantified it that way as well. It could have paid for 4,800 four-year college degrees at the University of Minnesota in 1980. That's the intellectual power that didn't get contributed in Rondo, right? That's the potential economic value that was not realized in Rondo. So it was not just a transactional house. There were other things that really helped to illustrate kind of the value of the loss. So, brother, I hope I'm answering your question, right, in terms of what was the actual loss. So now let's think about it in this way. Let me go back just one more. By each of these measures, which are about 18 measures, you know, a lot of people, you've heard the term net zero, right? Net zero. Net zero is kind of like zero, and then there's a gain from there. Or it's under net zero, right? So when we think about equity, and people talk about equity all the time, it's easy to say my value of my house went up, so therefore I have equity. But what about the emotional life space? I talk about root shock, right? So by 18 measures, Rondo ranks net negative. Financial security, education security, housing security. You kind of feel where I'm going with this, right? So an opportunity for us is to ask ourselves the question, how do we build that equity back? How do we figure out how we stitch together parts of the fabric, social, cultural, economic, civic fabric of a community overall? So we think we have the basis of the potential of doing that. Again, partnering with folks in the ecosystem, right? Leveraging transportation policy and transportation money, right, to build it. But we've got to have a plan. And we have to have a plan well in advance. How many people here have heard of the bipartisan infrastructure bill? Okay? It's important. I'll tell you why. Those of us in transportation know at some point money's coming for transportation investment. At some point it's coming. When Barack Obama was the president, it didn't happen then. When Trump was the president, it didn't happen then. Okay? Now with the Biden administration, $3 trillion worth of money available. Minnesota is getting $6 billion. I just want to lay this out for you. Minnesota is getting $6 billion. So whoever's ready for the money, all right, is the one that's going to be best positioned to access the money. And so as I said, the Central Light Rail Corridor, where this idea first emerged in 2009, here we are in 2024. We're in 2024, right? And the monies that came from the bipartisan infrastructure bill came about in 2021. So who's ready to seize transportation dollars, to leverage transportation to set conditions overall? So we're talking 21 acres of new land over the highway. 21 acres. Grotto to Chadsworth, approximately, between Lexington and Dale, right? So what's the potential? I mean, without question, what the potential is to figure out how to create jobs, how to bring about housing opportunity, how to bring about park space, gathering space, the potential of so many things. And so when we think about this, digital access, how many folks pay have cable bills that cost them a significant amount? And every time you see your bill, you're saying, dang. Right? Right? But one of the things that we learn in some of our studies is that connectivity is poor in communities that have been devastated by freeways. They cost people far more for not as likely good a service, right? It follows redlining. How many of you folks have heard redlining? Well, black folks were redlined and forced to live in Rondo. The freeway comes through and takes out folks, right? And then when providers, services, cable and others come through, they don't provide the connectivity in poor communities that have been redlined. Are you following? Okay. That's what happened in Rondo, and I would argue we could talk about North Minneapolis, exactly the same thing. I told you earlier, technical case, a business case, a moral case, and a just case. Are you following me? Yes. We're doing our studies, and we know what we're talking about, right? And it's important to rest on that. I'm just going to move forward a little bit. This was the technology study that we did. Okay? So when we talk about, you're on the internet comes up, you're loading in, right? You're trying to load the web page, and it loads a little slow, okay? That's what we call broadband load, okay? You can see in St. Paul, no gigabyte, I don't want to get too technical, but no gigabyte, meaning the speed is very slow. It doesn't even meet standards, okay? Even though there are 14 service providing technology providers, none of them service Rondo. They go right along the freeway, past Rondo. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Yes. Okay. So when we think about these studies and building this new structure of 21 acres of new land, the question is, how do we return benefit back to the community in everything that we do? Who's the primary beneficiary? Who's the secondary beneficiary? Who's the third beneficiary is the question. You got a question over there?
Just real fast.
Yep.
Is that based on the newest maps? Because the broadband maps, even for decades, have been really bad.
Absolutely.
Are those based on the new maps?
I'll just say as of June, okay, 2023. Now it doesn't mean that additional information isn't being gathered.
But that's after they started fixing the maps.
Okay, exactly. I mean, well,
You're really bad.
You're understanding exactly right. So we just have to understand a snapshot in time and the information that's provided here. Exactly. Thanks for asking that. Then we get into the anti-displacement study, which I can't emphasize enough how pleased we are to be a partner with the Rondo Community Land Trust. Because the reality is that as the Central Light Rail corridor came up and emerged, right, it becomes less and less affordable, right? Less and less affordable along the Central Light Rail corridor. Development is happening like crazy, right? And it's so important, again, that we lay out a study that says, how do we respond to this? Okay, how do we put the guardrails in for community? So there are 4 basic goals. Making sure that there are toolkits for residents and businesses, meaning a way in which to make space affordable, living affordable, etc. Those that lost, the right to remain and return. Community investment, how does that happen? How does that work? How do you leverage newly created land? And if we say, how can we position the community to be the developer? How do you position the community to be the developer? Because if you think about whoever is the developer gets the return, right? Bottom line. So if the community can be the developer, then the money cycles back into the neighborhood for a wide range of ways. So that's part of the reinvestment. I'm going to say we've been doing a lot of community engagement activities over the last few months, actually last few years, just to say, okay, if we have a blank canvas, if we have a new bit of land, the land doesn't exist there right now, but if we were to have new land, what should be on top of it, right? What's the aspiration of the community? Housing. Now, technical feasibility study says if we create 21 acres of new land, we can create 576 new housing units. Okay, if we create 21 acres of new land, we can put 13 acres of open park space for use in the community. If we create 21 acres of new land, we have the potential of being able to establish a marketplace for businesses. Okay, if we create 21 acres of new land, maybe a library on the land bridge connected to Maxfield School, just as an example, right? So we've been through a process over the last few years of community input that at least points us in the direction of what the aspirations and the desires of the community are. And they really center around these 6 areas: transportation and mobility, parks and open space, economic development, housing, cultural and history activity, as well as looking at environment and resiliency. And there's a lot of discussion around climate change, right? Impacts from pollution on the freeway and so on and so forth. These are all things that we're paying close attention to, including the technology study that I referenced before. What I'd like to do is just share just a couple of more slides and then I'll be done, and I'll hand it off to my colleague here, friend in the work. How we're looking at the entirety of our work is connected to 3 things: the anti-displacement work, so that people don't get displaced when new development happens, because usually that's what happens. Okay? People can no longer afford to live where they live. When we think about Allianz Field, right? We think about Sears near the Capitol. These are often driven by traditional private development mindsets. They're 2 bookends, and Rondo rests right center in it. If we don't put guardrails in place, okay, it's easy for the price of living to increase dramatically so that people can't afford, right? So it's, to be sure to do that is non-negotiable when it's all said and done. And so we really make sure that our anti-displacement policies and partnerships are in place, that we have this vision of it's almost like 21st century, right? For some of us, like this young girl right here, she's going to be here. The rest of us, at some point, we're not going to. So how do we set up a situation that gives her the benefit? And so on, right? And that's really what the proposition really is intended, including this little one that's sleeping right now over here, right? So what's the vision, and how do we set the conditions in the future, right now, benefit people here right now, but always make sure we're looking down, and that's part of our restorative development work. Finally, I'm just going to give you the dollars and cents. When someone says, well, what's all this going to cost, right? Well, for the structure, 21 acres of new land, and by the way, anybody know anybody making new land? Are you hearing what I'm saying to you? So for those of you that really, nobody's making land. So if you can imagine, how many of you drive, okay, going through the Lowry Tunnel, right? It's really a land bridge. Something on top. It's crossovers, roads, but it's the same thing, except for we're proposing 21 acres, which is about 5 or 6 blocks, okay? And so when we think about that, the cost of creating the structure is about $313 million. Now I'm going to ask you a really important question. How much did I say the state of Minnesota was getting?
6 billion.
So compared to $6 billion, is $313 million a lot?
No, not at all.
Now some people would ask the question, well, how come you just don't use that money for housing? Because it's transportation money. It don't get used for housing. But can we partner and leverage for resources for housing? The answer is absolutely. Leveraging this opportunity to create 21 acres of new land, 576 potential housing units. You kind of hear where I'm going, right? So when we think about this too, I want to just clip this on too. I talked about the bipartisan infrastructure bill. How much did I say that was? 6 trillion. Minnesota getting 6 billion. Now, it's not all for roads, but just hear what I'm saying. 80% of the cost of that 313 million can be paid for using that federal money. 80% can be paid for. That means the state would need to contribute about 63 million. Now, all we're asking the state is for 63 million. Are you hearing where I'm going? Okay, 63 million. Okay, it's considerably less than the 313, right? So that's how projects are put together using federal money and state money, right? And so that's what we're proposing to do, is to leverage. And then the development on top, 163 million. I think it's important, and you see that little, this right here? Again, that's the study that tells us this is possible, right? And gives us the direction. So I just appreciate so much you all hearing what I've got to say, because really, essentially, that's what this displays. 80-20 split, federal money, state money, total cost of the project overall. Yes?
That's okay. In your numbers, did you guys study on maintenance? I didn't see a dollar amount for maintenance.
Sure.
And also for the 18,000 jobs. We all know jobs have to end at some point. So how does those 18,000 people get more guaranteed for a lifetime? Because if we're talking about their generation, what I'm trying to say is, how do we keep the community still in charge of their hard work?
Yeah.
In maintaining the job staying, because at the end of the day, we don't want, how do I say this? We want to keep our people within our community. How do we keep them? That's what's running, because numbers all day are numbers.
Yeah.
It's always going to come.
Yeah.
But how do we build generational within it?
I would imagine, I'm going to let Maikia talk a little bit more about this as well, but part of what's important is to make sure that the community is always in decision-making control. Always in decision-making control. We've been working on this project. Oh, I see. We've been working on this project to kind of, through our studies, figure out exactly how we ensure that the maintenance of control is community in terms of decision making. The Rondo Community Land Trust is one model, and she'll explain that a little bit. In terms of the land bridge itself, it's really about creating, first of all, control of what they call air rights, the rights to develop on top, and then creating a governance structure, okay, which community, if we just talk about any decision making, you have an entity that says, all right, we're going to give the community 51% of the vote. We're going to give everybody else 49%. That's the only way to do it, right? It's the only way to do it. It's got to be structured so that the voice of community always leads. And so our anti-displacement study really focuses in on that specifically, okay? But the other thing, too, in terms of jobs, what type of jobs should be generated? Should it be jobs that are generated where industries are weak, or should it be jobs that are generated where industries are strong, right? When we talk about healthcare, finance, technology in Minnesota, those three categories are important in the way of creating jobs and then preparing young people in their education, right, to pursue those things that are going to bring them the kind of return.
I'm Maikia Griffin. I'm the newish executive director of Rondo Community Land Trust. And, you know, outside of the fact that I get to do really awesome work, I get to do affordable housing and economic development all over Ramsey County. But because I'm a daughter of Rondo, my family was here before '94 came through. I grew up in this neighborhood. I'm repping this neighborhood. I have the privilege of doing really great affordable housing work, but I have the honor and the responsibility and the weight to ensure that the Rondo community moves forward. As a kid growing up here, I've seen the resilience of the community, as well as the continued disinvestment of the community. And I'm going to try to move forward here. So a little bit about our mission. We're here to strengthen and preserve communities by providing affordable housing opportunities, and we support and celebrate cultural diversity by providing affordable business opportunities and increase community economic opportunities. I want to ground us a little bit in our history, and I'm going to have to be fast because how much time do I have? Someone count me down, count me down. All right. I want to ground us a little bit in our history, and Keith talked a lot about what happened. This is a map from 1935, and you'll see here in this thing, it just says largest Negro section in the city from 1935. From the 20s, from the 1900s to the 1920s, the black community was on a really great upward economic mobility tool. And outside of the fact of forced segregation, when my family came up here from Mississippi, they pulled over here. See where it says Gold Coast over here? That's the still rich neighborhood over there in Highland. Like, that's called Gold Coast back then. And they asked a little white couple, where do the colored stay? And they were directed to Rondo Avenue. And now they were impacted by 94 because they were renters. When they lost the house that they were living in, my great aunt was pregnant with my nephew. He would get so upset if he said that, with my cousin, my uncle, you know, he's my uncle. And they had a little daughter. My uncle they weren't able to really find housing outside of the community. And so they live somewhere on Aurora Avenue. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but you know, they still live there, still have the family house today. And they actually incubated 10 of their brothers and sisters that came up here. That's how my grandmother got here, great-grandmother got here, all of that. And so really becoming part in history of this fabric. Now, I always like to say, and I didn't really understand the significance of it, but I grew up on St. Anthony Avenue, literally right down the street from here. And my bedroom faced the freeway. I was physically separated from my family. I had to walk across a rickety bridge back in the day. I ain't gonna tell you how old I am, but I do have grandchildren, so that should tell you right there. Don't let the non-wrinkles fool you. But we would have to do that. And I don't know if you all know, but like Tiger Jacks, you drive up on corner of Dale and St. Anthony, Tiger Jacks. So my school bus was there. I catch a school bus, and Tiger Jack would feed us breakfast in the morning. That was community. I couldn't get away with not a thing. I really wanted to, but I couldn't. I had a huge family here, and that's how I grew up, attending Mount Olivet Baptist Church, where we had the sing-offs with Pilgrim, and St. James AME. And I graduated from Central. I'm just saying, I'm deep in it. And I have seen what's happened over the last even 20 years. The fabric and who we are as a community still remains in that spirit, but the identifiers that we used to go by are no longer really African American centered. And so not just because of 94 and urban renewal and forced segregation, it is really a confluence of many different things that have happened from even then to now, different policies. You know, we were, again, historic black community. We were insular. The Rondo community it still was for a really long time, even up to 20 years ago. Some of the same information that I'm gonna skip, I just wanna stop here for just a second, but this woman who's singing over here, she's part of the Credit Fund. And that was a social place where people went to because we had to create our own things. And they actually started the Credit Fund, and that started a cooperative credit union, a grocery store. I think there was a development team arm that they had. But when we think about we have already lived the answers that we want to see as a community, as a people. And so if we continue on with doing what we know how to do best, you know what that is? Resilience. So, you know what? Like all kinds of things, as we're grounded in history, do we need to be done? If that's fine, I can start. The community, the Rondo Community Land Trust, the Community Land Trust, I'm not going to even call it a model, it's a movement for me. Really started through the Black experience here in Rondo, where folks were trying to figure out once, oh no, you're fine. Once everyone kind of settled into wherever they were going to live here in the community after everyone was displaced from Rondo, other certain sets of policies started to happen. You know, we probably stretch as far as Laurel and Hague, and around the 60s and 70s, around that time, the only really nice place around there was Summit Avenue. And there were sets of policies around historic tax credits and other policies where folks were getting displaced. So the community did this, and it did this, and did a little bit of this, and did some shrinking and going back and forth. So at that time in the late 80s, when the city was trying to help restore historic properties on Hague and Laurel, those properties that probably were, I know my father-in-law purchased a house on Hague, very beautiful, Victorian, for like $20,000. That same house today is worth almost $1 million, not owned by the family. So that was the situation that was happening back when the Community Land Trust model was thought about to provide affordable housing opportunities for the organization. That was 30 years ago. I wasn't here 30 years. I mean, I was here, but I was not at the organization 30 years ago. And I also want to talk about the origins of the land trust. It is rooted, as we're end of Black History Month, that this is our Black history. The Community Land Trust model was started actually through the civil rights movement down south, when folks who wanted to have just the right to vote. And we all know what happened through the civil rights movement. The Nonviolent Student Union, Student Coalition, I always get that mixed up, I'm sorry, as they were organizing to have folks vote, people were getting kicked off out of their homes, they were being terrorized. I don't have to tell you all the things, we've seen many movies, but I know that people were living that every day, including my family. And they said, look, we're getting kicked off, sharecroppers getting kicked off their land, all this kind of thing. We need to, land is power, land control is important. And back then, these wonderful folks, the Sherrards, went around, they raised $1 million. And they purchased the largest tract of land, not only in Georgia, but in the United States at the time. It was over 5,000 acres. And with that, it was contemplated a new community. Everything centered under democratic land control, owned together, shared together, and then housing, economic development, agricultural, a main street, housing and schooling, and all of those things, its own community. And that was the first. Since then, it's been, the Community Land Trust movement has really grown across the United States, not even just the United States, but across the globe. Now there are over 460 community land trusts across the United States. And we are working with at least 4 other community land trusts that are across the globe. And as folks really looked at how were we going to use this tool, it became more of an affordable housing tool for folks. And that's, I always call it the Community Land Trust Classic, the, you know, light. I call it Community Land Trust Light. Do I need to be done?
You got about 8 minutes.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna be quick. But I just really like grounding us in the Community Land Trust history because we've lost that along the way. It is something that people died over back in the 60s because they had the audacity to own more land than some of the white owners that were down south. So I always want us to be grounded in that. And because of that ingenuity, there are community land trusts all over the United States and across the globe. Rondo Community Land Trust paved the way as the first community land trust in the state of Minnesota. There are now 15 others, and we are formally organized. If you were to put all of the stuff that we do together, we'd be the largest community land trust in the United States. That's how this work has moved forward. Okay, all right. What is a community land trust? What is a community land? We're a community-based organization, nonprofit organization. It's governed by It's governed by members. It's a membership organization. It's governed by folks who own houses and lease our business areas, and we have public representatives. So, again, that democratic process. What are we designed to do? We're designed to ensure long-lasting community ownership and stewardship of land. And you know what? We also create shared equity opportunities for folks to have. So, long arc from 1993, when Rondo Community Land Trust first came on the scene, to now, bam, right? Makia Griffin comes in, along with a really awesome team of great people. And you know what? We said we got to go somewhere. You know what we need to do? We need to go back. We need to reach back and understand that, as I said, we've already lived the change that we want to see. I know what it was and what it felt like to be part of an intergenerational, inter-economic mixed community where I was home, and this is Rondo. And we were that expression of what New Communities was. We had our own social fabric. We had our own enterprises, and we had economic opportunities. And I say, let's get back there. How are we going to get back there? So, Rondo CLT is moving to be and to serve as a community anchor and to use the Community Land Trust tool as a versatile, innovative tool to be able really to talk about how do we just stop displacement and how do we maintain control. So, as we're repairing for the past and building for the future, we have what we have called our reparative development framework that takes into consideration kind of CLT classic, what we were, right? Shared equity and shared ownership and kind of all of those things, yes, but it takes in the collective and it also takes in the individual. But it also talks about what's the solidarity economy that we're going to have and share together. How do we do goods and services together? Yeah, all this stuff, solidarity economy, keeping our dollar here. How can we do that? Democratic and dignified labor. So, what can we own together from cooperative worker owners, owning our own labor, being democratic in that labor, and culture and arts as a source of healing, because we need that as a community. What are we doing to do that? And then we also are place-based. We serve all of Ramsey County, but we are very steeped in what Rondo is and who Rondo is and what Rondo needs are. And, we're able to help get people along the way. So, all right.
I have a question.
Yes.
You say y'all is based the Rondo area and so forth in St. Paul. What about Minneapolis?
Isn't that nice? Yes, Minneapolis also have community land trust over there as well. So we all have territories because we decided to play nice together. And we have all of Ramsey County as Rondo Community Land Trust. And City of Lakes Community Land Trust is in Minneapolis. And so, but again, we have community land trust all over the state of Minnesota. So let's talk about what we do best. Our 30-year history really is steeped in our residential programs and affordable housing. So right now, we have a couple of things. We have something called our Homebuyer Initiated Program. This year, we're pairing folks with up to $150,000 of a grant to purchase a home. We pair it with your mortgage. And then you can shop anywhere in Ramsey County. We have some kickers on top of that, up to $200,000 if you are a right to return as part of our Rondo Neighborhood Legacy. We were awarded $2.2 million from the state of Minnesota to be able to deepen that work that we do. And this year we also were awarded just about $8 million from Minnesota Housing and Finance Agency to do a series of things. One is to about 35 folks in the Homebuyer Initiated Program, where it's up to the $150,000. You buy a house anywhere and we get in where we can fit in, and gives you choice. And we also then pair you with an additional $60,000 of kind of owner-occupied rehab, and the things that we're looking for in that program. One is to ensure that we can that we're looking at the mechanical systems and the roof and all of those things to ensure that you don't have to have any big major things that would come up for your house in the first 10 years. That's the goal. On top of that, we are working and have some funds to be able to start getting folks to what we are calling net zero. Not net zero in terms of what we don't have, but net zero in the cost of you running your home. Starting in 2025, any community land trust owner for housing, single family housing, will also have reduced property taxes. We do a lot of different things around that, and again, we're a developer at the heart of what we do. We've got about 500 units in development pipeline, which we will start breaking ground on soon here in the next, hopefully by summer. We've got a couple things, about 90 that we'll have in the Rondo community itself. And then our commercial programs. So we really support business owners. Right now, we have our affordable commercial space. So we do it in a few ways. If you want brick and mortar, we try to work with business owners that are ready to move into a brick and mortar and own their own building. That's nuanced, takes time. We work with that. But in our flagship development, right on Selby Avenue, we are renting out at $7 a square foot. Where do they do that at? $7 a square foot. It's important that we help people move along a continuum for affordability. And by the way, did I tell you that we are here forever? No, we are, seriously. We're here forever. So as part of our neighborhood legacy work, our right to return, if you have longstanding history in the community, those kind of things, we kind of give you first right of refusal in those spaces that are in Rondo community. And then for our legacy businesses, we are also preserving legacy businesses because we need to do that. And so we purchased Golden Time Coffee Cafe. We've purchased E&J Cleaner Site, which was a historic black dry cleaning business in the community. And, hold on, wait, one more thing. And taking culture, centering that culture piece between Lexington and Dale on Selby Avenue. We are continuing the legacy of folks that have been trying to, through Selby Jazz Fest and other things, make that the African American Arts and Cultural Corridor destination center, because we got to have somewhere to go before the bridge comes. Right? Well, I like to say, we the bridge before the bridge. We the bridge to the bridge, right? So again, it's doing all of that work that we're doing is also part of that. So between Dale and Lexington on Selby Avenue is the African American Arts and Cultural Corridor. And we are busy at getting to create spaces for community to come to. And I just say be patient. I've been here 2 years, but we've been growing the business and growing our capacity and growing the support that we need. But we've got about 80,000 square feet of commercial space that we have in production that still needs to be built, 18 to 24 months out. Some of them might be 36, but I don't like slow timelines. So we're doing that. And again, preserving businesses and buildings while we're here. So when we weave together our commercial work, our housing work to strengthen communities and to drive local economies, we are also looking at what's coming down the pipe, right? Keith has talked a lot about transportation, and yes, we do work with transportation TOD dollars. But there's more money that's there. It is our climate and environmental resiliency money that's there, and that's just about $1.5 trillion. 40% of that is supposed to be spent in underserved communities like Rondo. So we're getting ready to be ready, so that we can ensure that we, grab up, snatch down, deploy. And so we've been taking the 2 years to be ready to do that. So when we do that, right, all the cultural keeping, we're going to keep going. Oh, is that it? Okay, no. So some of our strategic priorities right now, we're going to grow our residential portfolio, expand our commercial land trust model. We're going to implement more shared equity ownership models. All this to create vibrant and cultural economic nodes, AKA Rondo. And you know what the most? Build people power. If we don't build people power, we're not doing the work. Okay. So just where we're at, a couple of other things. Rondo is poised to become a really large-scale developer. In this moment, we've got about 600 units of housing ready to be put into production. Then our goal is to create an acquisition and development investment fund, so that we can capture, work with other developers that want to get into the game and do that. And then a green infrastructure investment fund. And then we're opening a small business incubator at hopefully it'll be open by August. We are going to do that on Selby Avenue. Really our goal is to reseed those 300 businesses that were lost. And then really continue to concentrate on the African American arts and cultural corridor to ensure that we start building this place where people want to live, work, play, and be. And then we get to step back and ensure that what we do is, no one should be able to tell us no by the time we get ready for the bridge. And by the way, I'm hopeful that we can raise enough money that they're like, well, we need $350 million. Okay, well, we have it. We got it. We don't need you, government. Our goal really, again, is collective ownership of land and things.